everyone. If you're here for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. And to my OGs and forever subscribers, welcome back. Of course, I remain Ola, your DEI bestie. And you know what we do here? We keep it real, unpacking all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really hope that you leave every video on this channel with more inspiration to create a more equitable and inclusive world. Today I'm going to be ranting. I know you will say I've come again, but I just could not keep quiet. I could not keep quiet because IWD, which is International Women's Day, used to mean so much to me. As a feminist and DEI professional, I feel like there was a time that I used to actively participate in IWD. I used to even look forward to International Women's Day because I get it. There should be a day to commemorate the struggle for women's rights, the fight for gender equality. And that day used to be so special to me, but now I no longer participate. And I've been trying to unpack the reasons why and just get to the root of, my disconnect and dissonance with the idea of celebrating International Women's Day or commemorating International Women's Day. However, we would like to frame it because there's really very little to celebrate when it comes to women's rights in today's world, In the past, we used to fight for things like education for women, like voting. And, we've come a long way. There are new struggles, new issues that we grapple with, for women's rights. And I think that the way we celebrate and commemorate International Women's Day today is far off the mark, especially in terms of the real reasons why the day was set aside. Just a little history lesson, not to bore you all. International Women's Day was first suggested by a German activist, Clara Zetkin, in the early 1900s. Clara then suggested at that time that a day should be set aside to advocate for women's rights and women's suffrage, which is women's voting rights. And when International Women's Day was first celebrated, it was celebrated on March 19th, before it was later changed. But I think it is very significant that it used to be celebrated with rallies, like coordinated rallies across several European countries. Rallies really focusing and calling for advancement on women's rights to vote, women's right to own properties. There were like really specific issues that were advocated for on International Women's Day. March 8th was later adopted by the UN to commemorate it globally. But what I want to emphasize is that International Women's Day started off as being very, very rights-based. There were specific issues that were brought to the front burner on every International Women's Day. So it was not just commemorating the day for commemoration's sake. There were specific issues that were being called for and specific calls to action on that particular day. And that's why these days, it's really heartbreaking to see that on International Women's Day, we have this random International Women's Day website. People have been arguing about the organization or corporation that is behind this particular website that, everybody primarily goes to because that's what whatever search engine you use to look up International Women's Day, that's what it usually throws up. And this website sets out a very vague theme. Like last year, for instance, it was accelerate action. And then this year, it was give to gain. And these themes are so vague in terms of being very specific about the kinds of rights or the kinds of wins and actions that we want to see happen for women. In fact, this year, the website encourages people to strike a pose, a give to gain pose, and put it online, use the hashtags and all of that. And these activities are really great in terms of that visibility, right? You see people posting, and for once, women are at the top of the agenda, right, on that day. But then I ask myself, after all of these poses, all of these social media posts, what next? How has the needle really moved for women's rights? What can we look back on and say on IWD this year or last year or 10 years ago, we were able to advance ABC? How are we being accountable for the several rights that women still do not have today? In fact, it's even more heartbreaking that just a week to International Women's Day this year, a very prominent Iraqi feminist activist, Yana Mohammed, God bless her soul, was assassinated, murdered in her own home. Yana I can't even say was, but oh death. Yana was a prominent feminist activist who was behind the creation of the first women's shelter for women who were survivors of honor killings, trafficking in Iraq. I think her organization was called the Organization for Women's Freedom in Iraq, which she founded in the early 2000s. And she was murdered in her home because she had been a victim of death threats, actually, because of the work that she does advancing women's rights, particularly in Iraq. And, it's very heartbreaking that on a day like International Women's Day, just 1 week after the murder of a prominent women's rights activist, we really did not shine a light on what it means to be a defender or an advocate for women's rights today, especially in parts of the world where it is not normal to have a voice and speak about these issues. It's really insane that we did not take out this particular International Women's Day to hold space for such activists and to really look at our governance systems around the world, our democratic systems around the world, and how to make them safer for women's voices, women's rights, and women's leadership. These are some of the real issues that we continue to grapple with. In fact, a few weeks ago on Nigerian Twitter, there was a barrage of misogynistic tweets, people saying that they would rather be ruled by animals than be ruled by women. Than have women who are presidents, who are elected into political positions. And this is the reality of the world that we live today. We can't wish it away. On days like International Women's Day, I really hope that we can all come together and address some of these specific issues, right? And a theme that is as vague as gift to gain is quite problematic in terms of commemorating such a day. The theme is framed in such a way that women's rights seems to be good because it is a contributing factor to the world gaining, to the world advancing. And this is an argument that people have used to advocate for women's rights from time immemorial. However, how about we advocate for women's rights as an end in itself? I think that we do not have to say that women are good enough to have rights. Women are good enough to enjoy what every human being should enjoy. Every kind of right, every kind of power, every kind of space to thrive and to just be, right? We do not have to advocate for these rights as a means to an end. This is why when I think about the theme give to gain, it doesn't quite land properly for me, both as a woman and as a feminist. Another thing that is really problematic is the fact that the whole world now jumps on International Women's Day like a trend, with the fact that women do not enjoy the full spectrum of rights that we should be enjoying today. International Women's Day should be anything but a trend. You see organizations that have 90% male leadership or male management putting up fancy Women's Day posts to celebrate women. Actually, there's nothing to celebrate. Your workplace policies for women are not solid. You cover up sexual harassment in the workplace. You're not doing anything intentional to fully integrate working mothers, pregnant women in the workplace. You really do not care whether women thrive or not. But every year, like clockwork, on March 8th, you post a fancy International Women's Day celebration or commemoration post, or you launch a campaign and expect all of us to participate and clap and like and share. And I think that is quite counterproductive. If we want to celebrate International Women's Day, we should celebrate an International Women's Day that promotes accountability, where corporations, if they want to be part of the International Women's Day commemoration, have to really own up to how they have advanced women's rights internally within their institutions, within their organizations. For individuals within their families, are you a family that women's voices doesn't really mean much to you? When you are making decisions, you really do not care what the impact of those decisions are on women. And when things happen in the family, when issues like, sexual violence, domestic violence happen, how do you show up for the women in your family? It's beyond, posting and saying that International Women's Day, we want to celebrate women. You can't really celebrate women if you are not really acting and doing things that really move the needle on women's rights. And that is my source of irritation, really. I don't think that International Women's Day should be a fad that people who want to look cool jump on and just, tick that box because they want to be among and feel among as people who commemorated International Women's Day. Frankly, it is quite irritating. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not calling for an abolition or cancellation of the day. I mean, I've been part of the women's rights movement and gender equality movement long enough to know that any kind of visibility counts. The movement needs as many voices, as many highlights, as many moments as possible to ensure that we're spreading the message, we're spreading the gender equality gospel. But I do think that we need to be more intentional about how we use International Women's Day. I think that we need to call for more accountability. People need to show working, like they need to show that they are actually doing something that moves the needle on women's rights. I really don't think awareness and celebration is enough. Like, it doesn't really do anything if we all show up and have fancy posts and do a lot of activities on that day. And then that's it. We say goodbye only to meet again on March 8th next year. It doesn't really make sense. And frankly, it is a complete waste of everybody's time. At least that's what I think. But what do you think? It would be good to hear your thoughts on International Women's Day. How can we make it even more productive? How can we make it more impactful? What are you doing in your own little corner to advance women's rights, women's health, women's well-being? Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you picked up a thing or two, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.